So I am the first to admit when I am really, really wrong about something. And in particular, I want to talk today about how raw milk is becoming a concerning trend. So the reality is that I got this trend pretty wrong. So about 6 years ago, in January of 2018, I wrote an article about the concept of the raw water fad. It's not at all purified, it's not at all cleaned, it's just water from the ground, from the spring, direct. And you can imagine how this could be a problem because, of course, if you are selling water, which has not been purified or cleaned in any way, there's a lot of possibility for bacteria being involved. But of course, for, sort of hippie pseudoscience reasons, the concept of raw water became somewhat popular with Silicon Valley. Now, at the time, I really dismissed it as basically just a fad. And in particular, there were a lot of news sites talking about this fad in a way that I thought was irresponsible. I didn't think they should have covered it at all. Because the reality was, it seemed like they were creating the fad itself by talking about it. Which is to say that I believe that this was probably such a small thing that the fact that they were talking about it at all gave it publicity and just led to it, getting bigger. And that was a problem, right? Because this is not the kind of thing that you want to dignify with a response, as it were. You don't want to talk about these kinds of things if it could potentially lead to them getting bigger for no reason. Even when you cover something specifically to hate on it or specifically to talk about the controversy or the fact that it is objectively bad, that obviously means that, say you put out, an article or a video and say, 100 people read it, and maybe, say 95 of those people take away the intended message of the article or the video or whatever, and then maybe 5% of people, maybe those remaining 5 people, decide to go check it out. And then maybe 1 or 2 of those people end up, becoming customers or whatever. And you end up having the opposite of your intended effect, which is that a lot of people who probably weren't going to get into this anyway are just going to be like, yeah, definitely not for me. But then you might spread it to those few percentage of people who are interested. And that could lead to more and more people, getting into this. And in particular, basically, it seemed like at the time, all of the coverage centered around a single company. So basically, they were talking about how there's this raw water fad, and basically all of them kept pointing to the same company, which is a company called Live Water. There was just this single company that was selling this quote-unquote raw water. And in particular, it looked extremely amateurish. They had a really amateurish website that looked like it had been, done by somebody with zero web design experience. They delivered to specifically 2 places, which was LA and SF, and nowhere outside of that. And I was like, okay, yeah, this is just 5 guys with a truck or something like that, right? This is not actually a big business. This is just some little amateur small business dealio that some weird hippie is running, and you're giving it way too much attention. You're giving it way more attention than it deserves. And likewise, I think that there have been a lot of quote unquote fads, panics, etc. in the media in the past that I have, personally been somewhat dismissive of. A really good example is the Tide Pod Challenge. I don't know if anybody remembers the Tide Pod Challenge. The idea was that kids were eating Tide Pods to share it on Instagram, or I guess TikTok probably didn't exist back then, but they were doing this. They were eating a Tide Pod so that they could share it on social media. And what I really found was that there was a lot of people in the media talking about how dangerous this was, quite obviously, but also at the same time that I couldn't actually find a video of anyone actually eating a Tide Pod. I tried. I spent hours searching. I looked all over YouTube, I looked all over various social media, and I found a lot of videos of a kid putting it in their mouth, and then spitting it out, right? I couldn't find a video of anyone actually biting down, eating the dang thing, and it was I don't think anyone's really doing it. I don't think that's really happening that much. Maybe a few scattered cases here and there, but I don't get the feeling that this dangerous thing is actually happening that much. And so, I lumped in raw water and raw milk and a lot of other things in this general category of media panics that are probably overblown. However, I will admit that functionally I was totally wrong. So when it comes to raw water, I actually went back and I checked on that company, the one company that was doing raw water. They've expanded. They now deliver to a lot of other major metro areas. Their website is a lot more official looking. They've updated it to sort of get away from the sort of hippy-dippy pseudoscience looking look that they had before. They've updated it to look a lot more professional, to look like a legitimate business. And, 6 years of growth since then, I'm sure they are a much bigger business. They are a meaningful business now. They are delivering raw water to a bunch of people. Likewise, in particular, raw milk. So the concept of raw milk is not that much different from the concept of raw water, right? It's just, okay, it's milk, it's unfiltered, it's unpasteurized, etc. And, supposedly this has health benefits. It doesn't. And again, the risk that you're getting some kind of disease, whether you're having some kind of negative health effect from this, is significantly higher. There are no benefits to this. There are no long-term benefits to this. It's not a good idea, but it has started to become a big thing. We see people talking about it on social media in a way that I am not comfortable with. I see a lot more people talking about it. I see it becoming a much bigger deal. In particular, it's becoming a deal on social media. It's not just becoming a thing in the news, right? Again, my issue in the past is that I would see things covered by the news, see things covered by news websites, articles, whatever, and I would say, oh, you're just blowing a little thing out of proportion. But when I see things coming from, bottom up, when I see people talking a crap ton about this kind of stuff on social media, and that to me means that it is a lot more than just some silly fad, some panic that you see being played up in the media. And that means that I, as somebody who is in the health and fitness industry, I do feel like I have somewhat of an obligation to address this sort of thing and reiterate unequivocally that raw milk is not healthy. Raw water is not healthy. These things do not have any additional health benefits. It's very often based in the idea of an appeal to nature fallacy, the idea that obviously if it is closer to the way it is naturally, then it must therefore be better for you, when the reality is that we have the science, we've done the research. These things can be very dangerous for you in their quote-unquote natural, quote-unquote raw states, because there's just a lot more potential for disease. There's a lot more potential for ill health effects. And the methods that we use to make these things healthier, to make these things more purified, to prevent those kinds of issues, do not have any negative health effects. This is very much just sort of this, return to nature, appeal to nature, hatred for, science sort of thing, distrust for the scientific and medical communities and so on. And it's really worrying to me that these things are catching on in the way that they are, because they really should not be. I've made a previous video about the connection between the Paris catacombs and your health today. And I do highly recommend watching that video if you haven't already. What do the Paris catacombs have to do with why I'm healthy? You have no idea. Go watch that video. But what the video is about, summarized very short, is that basically for a very long time, people didn't think about public health. They did not, plan cities. They did not have public health initiatives. Didn't put fluoride in the water, didn't clean your milk, didn't ensure food standards, etc. And at that time, there was a time in which there was just giant open air pits in Paris where you would just put the bodies. People died, they would just toss it in a pit and you just leave them there. And obviously this would smell really bad. All the bodies would sort of congeal together after long enough. It's really gross, right? And so you just basically have these giant open air corpse pits stinking up the city, getting disease everywhere. Pretty disgusting. And, eventually they realized that this was a bad idea. And so basically they then ended up saying, okay, let's clear these pits out, set everything on fire, burn it all. Then I had a crap ton of bones left over. So they were like, what are we going to do with the bones? And they were like, all right, put them in these tunnels that we have under the city. That's how you had the Paris catacombs. And then, of course, they paved over those corpse pits. And now there's normal city stuff there, right? And that stuff is all gone. And people are much healthier in the city because they don't have to live next to these giant, stinky, disease-breeding pits of corpses, right? I say this story because this is a primary example of how, improved city planning, improved public health initiatives have made us healthier. Things like cleaning our food, things like ensuring food safety standards and doing recalls where it turns out that there are issues. Things like putting fluoride in our water. Things like teaching people to brush their teeth and try to exercise and try to eat healthy and so on. Having good health care. These are all things that make us healthier in a general societal sense, and in general are probably a lot more important to your long-term health than, basically just how much you work out, right? And this is a model called the social determinants of health. And basically it says that yes, there are a lot of factors that play into your health. It's not obviously just how much you exercise, right? It's also about your diet. It's also about how much money you make. It's also about whether you are socially connected and have the support of friends and family who care about you. It's also about whether you have access to psychological health, good health care, a doctor who can help you out when you need it, good safety standards in terms of your food and in terms of construction, in terms of all the other stuff that just is, the entire environment that you live in could be full of things that could be dangerous to you. And we have spent hundreds and thousands of years of advancing these systems, these plans, to make it so that we can generally be healthier and live longer lives. And to say, you know what, actually, I don't like food safety standards. I'm going to go back to, drinking raw water, drinking raw milk. That's basically going against hundreds and thousands of years of human progress. And you might say, oh, well, I think it's healthier. I think it's more natural. It's not. It really isn't. It's just an appeal to the naturalistic fallacy, and it's just going back against legitimate science, legitimate advancements in human knowledge for hundreds and thousands of years. And so again, I have to take a stance on this, and I cannot condemn this kind of thing in strong enough language. You really, really should not be considering looking into quote-unquote raw milk or raw water. It's not going to be good for you. It's not going to have any health effects, and it could have potentially very big downsides. At the same time, I'm sure plenty of people in the comments will be like, oh, well, I like it. And, you're just a shill for big science or whatever. No, I'm not. I mean, yeah, it's fine. You make your own choices, but they're not good choices. And I just want to make that very clear. So that is all for today's video. I hope you have enjoyed it. As always, don't hesitate to like, comment, subscribe, smash the notification bell. Let me know what you'd like to see in future videos. Leave any hate comments down below. Have a good week. I'll talk to y'all next week.